Isn't it funny what people come out with sometimes? Intentionally or otherwise, even the most offhand of comments can signal someone's beliefs and preconceptions. This week, let's discuss the latest such comment I received, which was about power cuts and how that might impact EVs. Does that make any sense? Let's investigate. This latest comment took me quite by surprise. For some reason I can't quite remember, I was explaining that I'd switched to an EV from an ICE car, and the immediate response was to say that I would not be able to charge it in a power cut. There are three reasons for this coming as a surprise. Firstly, it was from someone whose main hobby is entirely dependent upon using electricity for hours at a time, so they must know how infrequent power cuts are. Secondly, it was new on me. Once you get an EV, everyone is keen to tell you why they know for sure that it won't work, despite you being living proof that it does. But this was a new take on why it would be a problem, one that no one else had mentioned before. Thirdly, the speed of the response was telling. They said it immediately, without a beat. It came across as an inbuilt response, already decided upon and filed away for later use. No need for discussion, EVs won't work. That's how it seemed, anyway. So let's get straight to it. Could this be a problem? Certainly on the surface, it seems like a valid concern. If there's no power, then you can't charge, can you? Having said that, all car drivers already have plenty of experience of whether this is really an issue. That's because refuelling an ICE car also needs electricity. Fuel pumps don't run without it. And how often have you had a problem refuelling your car in the past? I've been driving about 30 years, and I don't remember ever having a problem because a fuel pump didn't have power. Is that relevant experience though? Some people might like to point out that it's entirely different. Refuelling an ICE car takes 5 minutes or less, whereas recharging an EV takes many hours, or at least that's what they think. The reality of charging is actually a little different from that, but warrants a quick revisit. Unlike refuelling an ICE car, there are two different scenarios for recharging an EV. One is on a road trip, and the other is for everyday use. When we're on a road trip, we might stop for a brief period and want to recharge quickly. For that purpose, there is DC rapid charging. DC rapid charging is expensive, very expensive at the moment, so you do this as little as you can. Time to DC rapid charge a car varies a bit based on its design. My Zoe is one of the slowest, and a big charge in this could be an hour, but more modern cars are more like half an hour. And bear in mind that the high cost encourages you to put in only what you need. So in reality, charges that long are not as frequent as you might think before you do it. And I don't think I've DC rapid charged for more than about 25 minutes in the year and a half I've owned the car. The other type of charging is AC charging. This is much slower, taking many hours to recharge the car in many cases. This is what we do when we're not using it, for example for an overnight charge. So with that knowledge under our belts, we can now assess the risk of power cuts. A power cut will probably cause the biggest problem on a road trip when we want a quick charge, which you hopefully now realise isn't all that frequent for the majority of people. Most of the time you charge your car when it's idle, when you're not using it, which is, after all, a significant amount of its life. For most people, the car sits unused for far more time than it takes to charge. So is this a risk? Yes, it's a small risk, and probably a larger risk than being affected when refuelling an ICE car, because of it taking longer to recharge than to refuel. As a result, the window of opportunity for it affecting you is larger, but it's still a pretty small risk. Perhaps about as big as a problem with the fuel supply chain affecting your ability to refuel. I don't know about you, but that has happened to me a number of times. How often power cuts actually occur will vary based upon how your power reaches you. Areas fed by local overhead lines seem to be affected a bit more frequently, but certainly where I live, It's rare that we lose power. I lived at my current house for over 18 years, and the power has been out 4 times while I was awake. One of those was that a main breaker had tripped in the garage, so it was local to my particular house. Of the others, one was a couple of minutes. One, the most recent, was about 20 minutes, and the other one was off for quite a long time. When I went to bed, it had been off for 5 hours at that point, but it was back on again by the time I woke up the following morning. On top of those, I think there might have been some overnight. I don't remember those exactly, but I'd say there have been something like 4 or 5 times I've needed to reset a few clocks when I got up in the morning. That's what tells me it's been off. So probably less than 10 power cuts in total over an 18-year period in this house. Is there any data to back up what is so far anecdotal evidence? There sure is. The UK power system is split into 2 main parts. The first is the bit we know as the national grid. This is the very high voltage distribution system, the bit we see as huge pylons running across the countryside. But the national grid hands off to separate companies who then deliver to us. This second bit is the DNOs, the distribution network operators, who manage lower voltage distribution networks in more local areas. There are 14 DNOs in the UK, owned by 6 groups. DNOs take connections from the national grid and transport the power to our homes and businesses. They are responsible for the local wiring and are not necessarily the companies we pay our bills to. So, to understand the reliability of the power that reaches us, we need to consider both the national and regional parts. Each publishes reliability figures that we can look at. First, the national grid. Their most recently available report is from the end of the 2022-23 financial period. In it, they published the high voltage reliability figure, which was 99.999997%. Absolutely extraordinary. The reliability of this high voltage network is crucial, of course, because storage is very limited at a local level. Therefore, downtime on that central network would impact all of the DNO's figures. But even so, that's a very impressive figure to achieve, isn't it? And then to the DNO, the bit that delivers to the house. My DNO is Scottish and Southern Electricity Networks. Their annual report, again from 2022-23, lists 2 reliability figures of interest. The first is customer interruptions. This is the average number of customers per 100 who lost power in the year, and that's surprisingly high at 45.51. In other words, 45.5% of customers lost power at some point in that year. That seems a lot more than I was expecting, so maybe the network is not as reliable as I was thinking. But the other figure is what we need to consider. This is the average customer minutes lost, and that's 46.4 minutes. Quite a big number, you'd think, but that's across a whole year. And there are a lot of minutes in a year, about 525,600. So that works out at a reliability of 99.996%. Again, pretty extraordinary. So in the UK, in the main, I don't think this is a significant risk. It's not something that keeps me awake at night, certainly. Some other countries might fare a bit worse. In the United States, for example, they use more overhead cabling. I think that's probably a consequence of the country being so big and less densely populated in general. As a result, power outages of more than a day occur there more frequently. Even so, there are plenty of EV owners who seem to be managing just fine. What is more, EVs might help with power outages rather than be hindered by them. After all, there are a number of cars on the market from which you can take power in one form or another. In the event of an outage, you can choose to run electrical items in the house from the car. That will reduce the remaining range of the car, of course, but it's a choice you have based on the amount of onboard storage on the car and what you value most. In summary, the ability to recharge your EV could be affected by a power outage, but your ability to refuel your ICE car always was as well, and you probably never gave that a moment's thought. Furthermore, some EVs can export power, giving you the choice to power parts of your home in the event of a power cut. If you are looking for a reason not to have an EV, then sure, use this as that reason if you like, but it's a pretty weak reason, really an excuse, in most countries. Thanks very much for joining me. Your questions and comments on this subject are most welcome. Do you suffer power outages more frequently than that? If you'd like the video, then it's a help to me if you click the thumbs up button. And it would also help me achieve my stretch goal for the channel if you would subscribe as well. Thanks.